Nick, what's going on? Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Business Boost Show. I am one half of your host, Therman. Nick, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Mr. DeCourcy in the building. Nick, listen, I want to talk about something specific today,
Okay.
which I know you can help me with.
I'll try.
Yeah. If you can at least, try. So earlier in the week, I was, perusing around LinkedIn, and a thread of comments led me to a Lisa Crosby video, which we can link in the show notes, obviously. Now, I don't know Lisa personally, but I know you've spoken to her, and outside looking in, she seems like a great person. And she, produces free content on the interwebs for people to consume. So that's always a good thing, right? Always helpful information out there. So I decided to join in. I watched one of her videos. It was about creating agents and Copilot agents, right? And I watched the video. And then when it was over, I felt confused and I wanted to ask some questions. So I go to the comments, but all through the comments, everybody is like, man, this is great. Thank you so much. This, that, and the third. So I'm like, dang it. What did I miss? You know what I'm saying? Because clearly information, but I don't like that everybody else gets it and I don't. You know what I'm saying? So what the video was about, I didn't even queue up the name here. But here, what she did was show how to create these agents in the 365 suite.
Yep.
And what she did was she scoped two different agents, I believe. So one agent was scoped to a library, and then I think she scoped the other one to a document in one library and another document in another library, I believe. And she, ran some queries. She was asking some questions of those documents. So the first thing I was confused about is, why do I have to do that? Like, why do I have to scope? Okay, I understand the concept of scoping. I know that if I have 100 documents, but 10 of them are about training, if I make a training agent, then I'm probably going to scope it to just those 10 documents. So cool, I get that, because the shot group is tighter. It does only about training. But I'm like, what do I have to do that for? If search by itself, without AI, if search by itself can comb those 100 documents and find the answer amongst those 10 training documents, why do I have to create an agent and scope it to just those 10 documents? That's my first question. I got some more, but what are your thoughts on that? Help me out here.
Okay, so when we're talking about agents, I mean, there's lots of different AI agentic frameworks out there. We're specifically talking about the agents that have come to Microsoft 365 Copilot. Declarative agents is what we're calling them in that context. And these are agents that you can build if you have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license, and some changes will be coming to that in the new year to make it a bit more flexible, to really allow you to tailor your experience of using Microsoft's AI. So your question of scoping. So why would you scope? And a lot of the time this is in this kind of idea of, well, I'm already using Microsoft 365 Copilot, and Microsoft 365 Copilot can see everything. So presumably seeing everything is always going to be better than seeing a subset of everything. And so in that circumstance, if it can already see everything, then what's the benefit that I'm getting? And it kind of comes back to this idea of, well, say you had a new hire turn up in your business and you want them to find something related to a project, for example. If you would just say, okay, here's your Microsoft 365 license, I've given you access to everything, then eventually they could find the right stuff, right? But if you said, okay, this is the SharePoint site that we use for this project, then the likelihood that they're going to turn up what you want and turn it up quickly and efficiently is much higher. How often have you seen situations where maybe over the period of time you've done 2 projects with this company, right? And you have 2 SharePoint sites. What would stop your new employee finding the old project and just stopping there because they don't have the context of knowing there's a new project. They don't understand that. So this idea of really funneling down the data that you're giving to whether it be an employee or whether it be an agent has the same benefit of you're saying, okay, we're providing some guardrails around what we're asking for to be able to get your answer to be better. There are some things where this kind of general, I'm going to look through everything, works really well. But there's lots of situations where it doesn't work so well, where you have lots of data that looks quite similar. Now think about it, lots of businesses have lots of data that looks quite similar, like if you have a SharePoint site per project, how often are there going to be repeating types of data between different sites? Because the way that you structure a project, the way that you contract a project, the way that you bill for a project is just how you do it within your business. So the hurdle of having to understand that this one is for customer A and this one is for customer B is a hurdle that you don't have to give Copilot. It's a problem that you can avoid happening if you scope it into saying, I have an agent for project A and I have an agent for project B. So that's really the benefit there of, depending on what you're wanting, sometimes it's just like, look at all my emails and find what I should be working on today. That's great. Give it all of Microsoft 365. But I want specific stuff related to this customer, then scope it into that customer's SharePoint side.
Okay, right. So then I was on the right track. I get it. I totally get that. But I'm also like, for this new hire who maybe understands we're in the world of AI now and is like a new way to search. You can search differently. You can use plain language, right? So what if the person at the top of the environment that can see everything, what if they just say, hey, listen, Project C is currently happening. Can you find me the statement of work for Project C? Something like that. So let's say that you haven't scoped for just Project C, but the agent that's at the top of the environment can see it. It's a part of everything, right? Yep. So what if you search in a way where you go, can I see the statement of work for Project C? But without doing anything, can I not do that? Like that doesn't work?
Yeah, you could 100% do that. And a lot of the time you'll get the right response. But Copilot in itself is not really a search mechanism. I mean, there's search that's going on within it, but it's doing a lot more than that. And so when it's searching, really what we're thinking about when we think about an AI tool like Copilot is two different types of data, right? It knows a lot because it's been trained on a lot. But that knowledge in relation to your business, like it understands what, SharePoint is, it understands how it works, it understands how a small business might market to other B2B businesses, for example. So it understands all of that stuff, but it doesn't understand specifically how Therman does business, right? Because it hasn't been trained on your data. It's been trained on data that is representative of probably what you do if you do things similarly to other businesses, but it hasn't been trained on your specific data. So what we have to do in order to make that more useful is give it data that's specific to you. But that data works 100% differently to the data it's been trained on. All we're doing at that point is something called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation, where essentially we go out, or Copilot goes out and searches across Microsoft 365 for stuff that is relevant to what you're asking for. It understands semantically the meaning of what you're asking for, and it understands semantically the point of the data that you're storing within Microsoft 365. And it pulls those things together to bring you the stuff that it thinks is most relevant, and then uses that most relevant content to give you an answer. The problem with that, though, is that the context isn't of everything. The context of that answer is maybe the top 10 documents, the top 20 documents that it finds. It isn't everything. So you can't say, okay, look at every contract I've ever written across my organization and bring that in and give me an answer that's related to that, because it doesn't have a context that's big enough to be able to do that. So this idea of like scoping in and being more specific, of don't just go off and take a kind of understanding of what I'm asking for and apply it across everything, but this is the specific thread of what I do that I want you to look at, is really very powerful. We can do exactly the same thing with actions as well. By default, Copilot isn't really acting on your data any more than, it goes into Word and you can create a Word document using Copilot, for example, or Excel. It'll add some columns and so on and so forth. But the other thing that we can do with agents is we can give them specific capabilities to do certain tasks for you. Whether that's update a SharePoint list, for example, we could do that with an agent. We could read specific information from a SharePoint list. We could go out to a third-party system with an API plugin to be able to act upon it. So by scoping, you're not just scoping data, you're also scoping capability and trying to break down your processes and the things that you're doing day to day into these kind of bite-sized chunks, where an agent with the combination of the AI and LLM and some knowledge and some capabilities is able to do this particular step or that particular step. We're not yet at the point of having like an agent that you start working with in the morning and it works with you through the day and it's an expert in everything you do. The agent is going to be an expert in one step of what you do, or an expert in one type of content that you're working with, or an expert in the files of one customer, for example.
So then an expert in like creating a statement of work.
Yeah, exactly.
So then if it's seen the statements of work that I've done throughout time, let's say from June to the end of the year, I had to create, 4 to 5 statements of work every month, trying to go after these projects. And the way that I train it is by having the agent see what I'm doing in real time, or like, how do I do what you just said, right? So like you said, we can scope it in various ways. What if I'm like, I want to make this thing know how I do statements of work and be really good at it, so that I can say, just got off a call, here's a transcript, can you create my statement of work for me? Like, what is that? Is that a thing? Am I dreaming big or what? Or
no,
not big enough?
I think what you're looking at is exactly where we would want to be at. So let me bring up a kind of example for you so you can see what's going on here. So in BizChat here, I can go ahead and I can create an agent. And if I just go ahead and jump over to configure, let's look at what are the pieces of the puzzle, what are the ingredients that go into an agent. So I have, for every agent, I'm going to have what we're talking about here, which is knowledge. So I can grab stuff from SharePoint. And depending on where you're building an agent, you can give it different types of knowledge as well. But if we think about this as grabbing stuff from SharePoint, so this could be, in your particular case, this could be examples of statements of work that you've created before, for example. Good ones, the ones that you want to repeat,
maybe the archive.
Right? I'm sorry?
It could be the SOW archive. Like every time we create one, whether we succeed or not, we put it in this library. Like it always goes there.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So whatever it is that you're trying to achieve there. Now, I would say, if you're trying to build an agent that's purpose is to build successful statements of work, right? Then perhaps you're better off populating your knowledge with 20 of your best ones rather than 100 of all of them, right? Because there are certain things that you might want to look at in there, and that have been successful with you. But the other aspect of this is going to be your instructions. That what you're building out, you're not coding these things. You're not writing any code. You're just putting in instructions. So let me grab a template. This is a new thing that's actually arrived in the last couple of days, that I can take one of Microsoft's agents and I can put this in as a template, and then I can kind of work off that. So let's look at this one prompt coach. And this should go ahead and populate this. And if we take a look at these instructions here, you can see what we're doing here is giving it its purpose, telling it its goals, just in natural language, telling it what you want it to do. So if you were thinking about, I want to apply this to my process of creating a statement of work. So say your prompt that you're going to throw into your agent is going to be, this is the details of the new client that I've just started working with. This is the project that we talked about, etc., etc., etc. That's going to be the content of your prompt. Your instructions are going to take that prompt and analyze it, understand it, and reconfigure that information or search for related information in such a way to be able to deliver an outline of a statement of work for you. So you'll write instructions that are really, this is how I want you to do this every single time. And between those three things, your prompt, your instructions that you've built into your agent, and the knowledge that you're giving it to work off of, and that could be a range of different things. You could give it knowledge which is existing SOWs that you've got. You could give it knowledge which are the products or services that you offer. You could give it knowledge which is your pricing information, whatever you wanted to build into it. And then by scoping it that way and giving it the right instructions, you're able to build out an example of an SOW. It's going to be something you're going to want to take and edit, but it's going to get you 75%, 80% of the way there just from those instructions. And then your job, instead of starting from a blank document when you take this and put it into Word, is going to go from that blank page to a page that's got something that gets you most of the way there, and then you just have to work through it and make some edits, update some language if you want to, and then you've got your SOW.
Okay, all right. So that helps, because I remember seeing Lisa do that too, where she explained, the various inputs you would give it. Now, the next piece of where I was confused is who does this, right? So my thinking is always on the end user. So I'm like, who would find this beneficial? Now, granted, tons of people throughout the organization, I feel, will absolutely find this valuable. No question. But I feel like if I could get this power in the hands of the CEO, this is like a 10x, right? But when I think about putting this power in the hands of the CEO or the leadership team, who is always complaining about not being able to find things, this is my thinking, is that I have to match the experience of what we have on the outside, right? So no one is scoping ChatGPT. No end users are. They're just going to the tool and using it, because in the background there's folks working and updating it constantly and doing what they got to do. They're training it, all that other stuff, right? I have to think the same way for the CEO, not just the CEO, but the users as well. But I'm just thinking about 10x in here, right? If the CEO wants to find the numbers for how the company did last quarter. So, what were the sales last quarter? In order for the CEO to do that effectively, other folks have to do what Lisa did, right? Like, they got to get these agents out there, scope them properly, and then after that, to the knowledge piece, the knowledge continually has to be fed there. So wherever this information is coming from, you have to continually populate it and make sure that you give that to the agent. Then the instructions may or may not need to be updated over time. I don't know. And then this agent has to be provided to the CEO or the leadership team, and you tell the CEO, hey, this is your kind of like your finance agent. So any financial questions you have, talk to this agent. Who is doing the management and building of what Lisa did? Who are those people? Is it us?
I think the answer is probably a variety of people. If we give another example here, so now we've jumped into SharePoint, right? And
I like
in
this.
SharePoint, this feels wrong that I'm talking to you and I'm doing a SharePoint demo. But anyhow,
I'm always learning.
We'll just go with it. So obviously I've got a document library open here, and using the new Copilot capability in SharePoint, I always have a default agent. So there is an agent that now sits in every SharePoint site that is scoped to that SharePoint site, that is just going to answer questions about the data that exists within that SharePoint site. And when we say data, we're currently talking about the contents of files and the contents of pages. We are unfortunately not yet talking about the contents of lists.
I'm sure they'll be there eventually. But
we're also not talking about the contents of metadata columns. So one of the things that I don't think is so great about this yet is it almost disadvantages the people who have spent the most effort in using SharePoint in the way that people like us have told them to use SharePoint. But I'm sure that will change over time. Like this is a moving feast. So anyhow, it is where it is today. So you have this approved agent which has been approved. This is the default one, but you can have other approved agents that are created for your site, and there's a default one in there. And I can create my own agents. So say I have a set of documents that I want to have an agent for. Say it's this couple of documents here. I can create an agent straight from here, and that will be scoped in to these two documents, for example. So I can immediately create an agent where I can have a conversation with some content. I can do that as a user. You can go more complicated than that, though. For example, I think I've got the example here, this project compliance agent. And if we go in and we take a look at this agent here, we'll just take a look at what this is doing. I'm going to jump in and show you that actually this is now pulling in content from two different places. So I have content that's in my Project Falcon site. I also have content that's in my demo content site, which is some policies that I've got here. And I've got a set of behaviors, so I've written some fairly detailed instructions here. If I can open this up so that we can see it. I've written some pretty complicated instructions here about what I want it to do, how I want it to answer my questions, and I've had to go through and test this and iterate on it. And the objective of this particular agent is to look at all the files that I've got about my project planning in my project SharePoint site and compare those to my policies that are in a different SharePoint site and work out whether there are any compliance issues that I've got on some of those files. And so these kinds of use cases, you're probably not going to have everyone in your office who's creating stuff like that every day. The more basic kind of, I've got a folder full of documents and I want to be able to chat with those specific documents is maybe the way that's going to work. But maybe on a team by team basis, you might have someone who's going to become more familiar with this and work on it in the same way that we've talked about low-code makers. You know, if you've got that person who's built some Power Automate flows, you've got that person who's built a Power App that's just working on a team basis, then maybe it's that person. If you've got someone who's been customizing SharePoint, doing some JSON formatting of what your document libraries look like or something like that, then maybe it's that person. But then on an organizational basis, there are probably some challenges around how do our processes work, what systems can Copilot talk to, that are probably more your IT team. I mean, I doubt many people are going to be going out and building their own API plugins in local teams, you know, but you might have a central effort to say, okay, well, these are the three core systems that we work with outside of Microsoft 365, and so we're going to build a graph connector, we're going to build some open API plugins to connect into that so that we can publish some agents across the organization. So I think it really depends on what you're trying to do and how complicated your picture of how you do it is. But I think it still comes back to this. There will be local problems that maybe you yourself can fix that help you to do your work better. And then there are going to be things that are tools that your organization is going to give to you to help you use AI in a more effective way for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with this. I need my goal. So you said it depends on what you're trying to do. To me, my goal and people in my position, we should always be thinking how to help people do their job more efficiently. That's the thing. That's the goal that I'm always after. If I see the CEO is, rubbing two sticks together trying to make fire, I'm gonna come over there and be like, look, man, there's matches, you know what I'm saying? Or one of them automatic lighters or whatever, you know what I'm saying? There's a better way to do this. So now I'm thinking, who do I talk to and say there's a better way to do this? Let's say that you have an MSP. If your MSP, right now, today, I feel like I could talk to an MSP and tell them, here's how you can enhance SharePoint for that organization that you support. I feel like I can do that today because you don't really necessarily have to know, you don't have to have context of content. You just need to understand how SharePoint works, see what they need, and then, help them out. But I feel like with AI, you need context of the content, which comes from those SMEs inside of the organization. But those SMEs are doing something else. They're not technically tuned in. So if my finance, back to the example of trying to get this stuff in front of the CEO, if my finance SME doesn't sit down and help me capture their knowledge and get the AI to think like this, then my AI agent is only going to be as good as my best guess from a financial standpoint. But really what I need is that finance SME or all the finance SMEs to help me over time really train this thing to be super effective. So when a new person comes in and a new person is like, well, how do I figure out, what we looked at last quarter, we looked at this quarter, what are some things we should be looking at, trends or whatever, it's finance speak. I don't know, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like that comes from having context, and those are the subject matter experts inside of the organization. How do I make my AI agents as powerful as, not them, because they hold all the knowledge, but effective? I want this thing to be effective so that I could leave that organization and say, listen, the combination of your agent along with your finance folks will make you powerful. But the piece missing there is the technical person capturing the stuff from the SME, building this agent properly, and then sending it on its way to, keep doing that. I'm struggling with that because how do I get there? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I get there? I think that maybe in my situation right now, it's a hurdle, let's say, to get people to, think about SharePoint as more than just a document management system. So if I do that, I got to get to the decision maker. If I can get to the decision maker will tell me, yes, let's do it. And here's the person you stay in contact with. They're the point of contact. Get it done with this point of contact on behalf of the organization. So maybe that way, maybe the point of contact, I'm the AI expert. I get with the point of contact who's the finance SME or whatever, and then I build that thing over time. It's just that in my thinking, I want to make it like end user friendly. The CEO can find what they're looking for. People throughout the organization can find what they're looking for, but the lift to get there is not so hard, is what I'm trying to wrap my mind around.
Yeah, I think that the thing is, like, if you could describe the process, and maybe you describe the process because you have good SOPs in your organization, then you can take that SOP and you can have that as a framework for what you want an agent to do. One of the big questions that I think comes up is, well, if I can have an agent that is going to do X, why wouldn't I just have a Power Automate flow that's going to do exactly the same thing?
And that was one of my thought processes too. Yep. Yeah, I thought about that too.
The level of complication in building out that Power Automate flow is far greater because, number one, you're not just writing in natural language. I mean, we now have Copilot in Power Automate, so maybe you do write in natural language, but the capabilities of that are still fairly limited. But I think the analogy that I like to look at with this is that when you're working with an agent, and particularly when you're working with some types of agents versus others, but we'll say agent for the purposes of what we're talking about here, you're kind of like having something that's like moving down a roadway and is able to understand where it's starting, understand where you want it to finish, and is able to change lanes along the way to move down the roadway efficiently. But when you're building a Power Automate flow, you're building a set of tracks for a train to go down. And you know that it can only go down the tracks. There's less variability. But as soon as that track gets blocked, a train isn't going to change lanes. A train is stuck until you unblock the track, right? So the actual capability of getting from point A to point B is essentially the same. But the level of complication that you maybe have to create for yourself to think of every permutation along the way is greater when it comes to Power Automate than it is to these. You can literally go in, change your instruction a little bit, see what comes out. Go in, change your instruction a little bit, see what comes out. Can you do the same thing with Power Automate? Well, you have to be a pretty skilled user of Power Automate just for it to be second nature to go in and grab the right actions to start changing around exactly how it's working, you know, and there's certain UI limitations in doing that as well that can make it a little bit frustrating. So this is a better end user tool. 100% in my view, a much better end user tool, but also a lot quicker to iterate over. Like you can sit with someone in a meeting. If you know what you're doing with this, you could have an hour's video conference with someone, and by the end of that video conference, build something they can actually use based on them describing their workflow. So long as that all sits within Microsoft 365, and you're not having to go off and build a connection to a third-party system. If it's just a matter of interpreting or reinterpreting data that you already have access to, then you can build something while you're sitting there very, very easily. I've done it in a number of sessions now.
I tell you what, the way that you describe this makes me feel like, you know, even though, look, I don't hate Excel. I just think people use it the wrong way. So my example is that, you know, everybody and their mother uses spreadsheets, and they like to complicate these spreadsheets. But what always ends up happening is that person outside looking in, it looks like chaos to me, but to them, it makes sense. So now if they got their 4 or 5 spreadsheets, they throw them in a library somewhere. They got their 4 or 5 spreadsheets. These are very complicated spreadsheets, but they all relate to each other somehow. And they understand that. What you're saying to me sounds like I can put them inside of a library, get an agent in there, and then teach that agent what I know. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, listen, these 2 spreadsheets came from this project, and here's what wow, there's a bug flying around in my studio. Interesting. So here's my 2 spreadsheets. They came from this project, and here's how they relate. And pay attention to this column. This 3rd spreadsheet, this is just some supporting information that I got from this other thing. And these other 2 spreadsheets, they're in the weeds about the first 2 columns that I talked about in the first 2 spreadsheets, something like that. If I can, in detail, give that information to my agent, now it sounds like I'm starting to see clearer how this could work for somebody there's a lot of people in this situation. For somebody who's in this situation, they can now kind of provide a way for someone to get information separate from them. So if you try to send me your 5 spreadsheets and explain to me how they work, don't even put that in my inbox. If you instead send me a link to this library, or maybe just you send me a link to the agent, and you tell me, listen, the agent understands the scope of what's going on here and the complications. Use this agent to get what you need. So then the person goes, okay, for project X, how many people worked on it that were paid more than $150,000? How many vendors did we work with that cost us more than $150,000 on this last project? It should be able to answer that if that data is in there and if that person has trained the agent properly, is what I'm hearing. Do I have that correct?
I mean, you still have the fundamental issue, and Excel is particularly the case when it comes to this. So if your data is not structured in an understandable way, then it's very difficult to make Copilot understand it. So you still have that foundational issue of like the quality of the data is really important. So if you've got Excel spreadsheets where stuff is all over the place and they're not really used in a way that makes sense, with columns or rows being used consistently, or data being presented consistently across those spreadsheets, then you're still going to run into serious limitations whether you're trying to use Copilot in Excel, or whether you're trying to use Microsoft 365 Copilot, or whether you're trying to use Agents, or trying to use anything else that's going to, in an automated way, understand that data, because the data simply is not understandable based on the way the person has created it. I mean, we keep, I think we keep kind of skirting around that issue, but there are lots of people that they use Excel incorrectly. When it comes to these things. So, and I mean exactly the same with like, Word. If you used, you could, I guess, write all of your document in comments, right? You could choose to do that. Would it be an effective way to use it? No, it wouldn't. That'd be the wrong way to do it. I'm going to write the entire thing in the headers and footers. You could have weird ways of using Excel that you don't see, but it wouldn't be right. So this fundamental issue of if your data is not structured in a way where it can be understood, then no one's going to understand it, and that includes humans, and that includes AI as well. So is your data readily understandable? If the answer is yes, my data is readily understandable because it's structured in a way that is consistent and makes sense, then are we able to work with our AI tools, whether that be Copilot, whether that be ChatGPT or whatever, to get more value out of it? Yeah, but this kind of battle of, well, your data has to be structured in the right way. Your SharePoint sites have to make sense. You can't just have like a dumping ground for everything. Like if you have 18 different versions of the same document just sitting there next to each other with very little difference between them, then your team is going to find it difficult to work out which one is which, and so is AI. I mean, we're not going to get away from that. So this kind of basic, you need your data to be presented in a way that it's accessible and it's well organized, and you've got kind of data retention worked out and so on. That's still in there, and I don't see a way that we're going to get around that. Like if humans want to be helped by other humans, then they have to make the stuff that they work on understandable to those other humans. And if we want to be helped by AI, then we have to make that stuff understandable to the AI, and we cannot get away from that.
Yeah, my thinking is along those lines, because for the way that I think is, we've mentioned this on the show before. Before you go doing a bunch of extra fun, wacky stuff, let's get your house in order, or at least to the point where, this is presentable before you start inviting people into your house. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is the point of me taking you out of spreadsheets and putting you in SharePoint. Like, that's the goal there. It's to present a better option to you that forces you kind of to really think about what you're doing here with your data. Like one of the things that I always talk about is, when you create a spreadsheet, you could just create it and go crazy. You know what I'm saying? There's less barrier there's less thinking that you have to do when you create your spreadsheets. But when you create a SharePoint list, you have to think about what data you're capturing and how you're going to be using it. So it's a different way to think once you do that. And that's okay because it makes your data higher quality. So I want you there so that when you start doing these other things, you're talking about good, clean data, or as good as we can be at that point.
Yeah.
But the thing that I was just thinking a second ago was, first of all, the reality of the situation is a lot of people are not going to get there. Got it. Fine. I understand that. They're in love with their spreadsheets and they're going to stay that way because it makes sense to them. I was just wishing that even with your jacked up spreadsheets, respectfully, that you could still get some AI in there and tell the AI, because you can't tell another person. You try to tell another person, their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to be like, leave me alone. But if you can at least tell your AI, who will sit there and listen to you forever and ever, that at least you could explain to the AI how jacked up your data is, but how it makes sense, that maybe that would have been helpful. But I guess...
I think that's an interesting point, actually. And I think it would be an interesting experiment. And I don't think any... I certainly haven't tried this myself, and I haven't seen anyone demo from this perspective of, most people, when they're demoing this stuff, they start with stuff that is relatively neat.
Right.
And go off from there, right? And it works for that. So if you started with a complete mess of documents, but you explained the thought process behind that mess in your instructions and tried to get the agent to work that out, would it be able to apply that thinking to that mess every time it went in and did it? Probably, if it's not too many steps. If there's lots of if this then that within it, then I think you're going to struggle with the technology as it sits right now. But if there's a basic logic that you wouldn't apply just from looking at what you're finding, but it's a consistent logic that does apply. And I'm really struggling right now to think of an example of how you would actually build something to demonstrate this. Maybe I need to see some of the spreadsheets that you're talking about. But could you do that? And I mean, I don't see any reason why you couldn't.
Well, that was my 5 spreadsheet example. If you got 5 spreadsheets and you understand it, but again, don't send that to me and try to explain it to me. But maybe you could tell AI how your chaotic, how your chaos makes sense. Now you and the agent understand. So now maybe you can get somewhere, because I can't get you to get out of the spreadsheets. You love the spreadsheets and you think your way makes sense. Cool. But can you sit down with your agent, train it on how you think about it, and you don't have to write code. You can write it in plain language.
Yeah, I mean, that is the big difference.
Can we be effective that way?
Yeah, you could write it in plain language, and I think it would be something that's interesting to try. I mean, there are certain things with these tools that work really well in the context of I'm doing a fairly basic, plain demo, and don't scale hugely well. So I think that's an important thing to think about, that you don't necessarily always see the downside. I mean, things are getting better, but there are downsides to some of these tools where you start to get into complicated information. But I would be interested in pursuing your line of reasoning there of, we have this this messed up approach to saving information. Can Copilot circumvent that to make it understandable to other people? And the answer is I don't know. Maybe we'll have to try it out and get something for the next episode to show people.
Yeah, maybe a call to action. If you don't have any data that you don't mind sharing on the internet, and you think you got some wacky spreadsheets, send them my way, because I'd like to see that. I would, if I could. I'm all about meeting people where they are. And if I meet you where you are and I tell you about SharePoint and then your ears perk up and you're like, ooh, that sounds interesting, then we can move on. But if you're just like, I want to stick with what I stick with, I'm just like, all right, cool. But if I could offer you something, if I could say, all right, well, listen, have you heard about agents? You can train an agent to basically know what you know and then let that represent you throughout the organization. Maybe you're just into your data. You get your data, you structure it how the company has asked you to. They told you to do something. You've been doing it like this for years. How would you like to sit down with an agent and tell it what you know? Because you might be retiring soon and we need to know this information. Train your agent. And then we can use the agent after you leave. Maybe, I don't know. Or the person who takes your position can use your agent.
There are other tools in that kind of space, kind of framing what we do in that way as well. I mean, there are tools right now that will visually look at what you're doing on screen and understand a process based on the steps that you're taking on screen, for example. So there are tools that can help us with all of this stuff, you know, depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve there. But this idea of, well, I'm going to teach an agent to interpret my mess for everyone else, I like that as an idea, because I don't see that in the examples that I've come across. I mean, I've done a little bit of that. One of the clients I've been working with this week has been dealing with how do we process frequently asked questions using an agent. And, you know, trying to dig into a ton of different question and answer pairs and get the best response based on them, and making Copilot or an agent cite them in a reasonable way, ends up with, it's not the most complicated set of instructions, but it's a more complicated set of instructions to get out something that's useful to everyone, as opposed to just the user that has put together this list to begin with. So that kind of stuff does come up, but the more kind of esoteric, you know, I just am a bit chaotic in everything that I do, and it's very difficult for everyone else to work with this. How do I get an agent to be my interpreter? I don't know. Let's try it.
Yeah. And I tell you what, my thought process before we get out of here, my thought process is, again, with generative AI, you have now, I know it existed before ChatGPT, but the reason why ChatGPT grew so fast is because it met us where we are. We have been using search like Google for years. And as we've been using it, we've been able to get a little bit more, you know, fancy with the search. But what they did was made it even easier and made it even better. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can speak to it normally and it can return things normally to me. And I think they trained it for 3 years on that, right? So I'm like, once you have shown the world that this is a possibility, anything less than that, you're now making me feel like it has to be work. So if we don't blow up ChatGPT, if that doesn't happen, and then Copilot comes out of nowhere and they're like, look at these things you could do, I'm like, oh, hell yeah. You know what I'm saying? This is great. But now I've seen what you could do with generative AI on a just spin it up, log in, and start asking it questions. And I can do it from my phone, obviously, like normal. If you can do that for my organization, and I'm in my organization, and you know how I said sometimes, you know, ChatGPT will get some things wrong. Fine. But imagine that, me being able to do that with my organization, my large organization, because I hired some folks who came and said, listen, give us a year or 6 months or whatever on this contract, and we will get this data where it needs to be so that you can, you know, use this like this going forward. For these big organizations that always find it hard to get things, you know, get stuff out of their organization that they're managing, this would be so powerful because they did it for the internet. So if you can do it for the internet, you can do it for my organization. Let's see that happen. That's where I'm like, you know, meet people where they are. And most people are managing those jacked up spreadsheets. We just know that's how it is. Look, Nick, this is good. This is very, very helpful to me. So I know if it was helpful to me, I know it was definitely helpful to people watching. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up, share it, you know, shoot it to your folks. And this is a good, I think, understanding of where we are with Copilot and what to expect. And shout out to Lisa for shooting that video too.
She does some great stuff. So yeah, certainly go check out her videos. She does very good walkthroughs. If you want to learn how to do this stuff, then you can almost sit there with the screen open and the video open and do it alongside her. She's very, very clear with that stuff.
Good deal. So Nick, before we go, what you got? Where can people find you, and maybe what you're working on now that's helpful to folks?
Yeah, so obviously check me out on LinkedIn. I do share there, not as often as you, Therman, but I do try. I do try. And the thing that I'm kind of most focused on at the moment is that I just, in the last couple of weeks, I think I mentioned it in the last episode, released my Responsible AI for Business Users on-demand course. I really think as we get more people into this space, we've got people building agents, we've got people maybe building things that act on other systems with AI, it's becoming all the more critical that the people who are using AI in your organization, and that isn't always just going to be the people you've bought an AI tool for, that's probably a lot more than that, now understand how to use it safely and responsibly. So I've put together this training, bite-sized videos of 10 minutes or less where you can work out what the key things that you need to know to keep yourself safe while using AI. And there'll be a link down below to find out more about that if you want to. How
Good
about
deal,
you,
love it. I actually just dropped a new course, Automate Your Status Report. AutomateYourStatusReport.com, because people are writing their weekly status reports, and I know some people hate it. But this is for people who don't mind doing it and also recognize the value in tracking the things that you're doing. So, but it's not automated. So what I did was show people very easily how to jump inside this environment that your company's already paying for so that you can automate your status report. You just go in there. This is literally what I do. Like, I already do this for one of my clients. Throughout the week, I keep my status report updated inside of a list. And then every Monday at 10 a.m., it goes out to the folks that it needs to go out to and shows them the update. Your supervisors and everybody else will appreciate you for your regular cadence, regular structured, formatted status report. And you will appreciate it yourself because you will get out of this. I don't know what you're doing now. Maybe you might be sending emails and then keeping the emails inside of a folder somewhere. Like, I mean, that's cool. That's fine. But, I would suggest that you use my way, especially if you get ready to leave the organization. Export it all out, take it with you, and bring it into the new environment. Like, just go check it out. See if it's for you. I'm gonna let you make that decision on your own. But that's what I got. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn every day.
Yep. Cool.
All right, good deal, Nick. I appreciate it. I'm sure the folks watching appreciate it too. So I will see you next time.
All right, see you, Therman.